Okay, we're reading the rules to Sylvion, which is a favorite card game of mine for 1 to 2 players in the Oniverse, which is the same universe that was first introduced into gaming with Onirim, another favorite game of mine. Both of these are 1 to 2 players, so solitaire or cooperative with one other person. Let's jump right into the rules here, and I'll read them out loud and annotate or comment if it might be helpful, I think. But this will be a pretty casual thing here, where I'm not going to be teaching the rules from my own perspective directly, but just reading them. So let's take a look here. Book of Rules for Sylvion. Art on the first couple pages. Here's the table of contents in case you want to look where you might want to skip in this video to see what I'll be talking about at different points. The Grand Forest of the Oniverse is in danger. The Ravage, a terrifying fire entity, has raised an unstoppable army of elementals, scorching everything in its path. The ash trail it leaves behind clearly points towards its destination, the heart of Sylvion. As the sole guardian of the forest, you must stop this incendiary power. Choose the best defenders, deploy them at the most opportune time to douse the ghastly flames, and save the forest of the Oniverse. Sylvion is a solo/cooperative game for 1 or 2 players, in which you must first prevent the Ravage cards from inflicting too much damage, for if the forest's vitality falls below 0, you immediately lose the game. Then, once all Ravage cards have been played at the end of the final assault, you must ensure that the vitality of the forest must be at its maximum. To succeed, you will need to efficiently use your Sylvion cards, unravel the Ravage's scheme, and counter its fiery rampage. The rulebook presents the game in 3 steps. 1. Introductory game. Planting the seeds. The first step will allow you to start playing the game quickly, without having to read the rulebook in its entirety. Playing this mode will introduce you to Sylvion's core concepts. 2. Advanced game. The Siege. Here you will be presented with the remaining concepts and rules, recruitment and mobilization, as well as new cards. 3. Expansions. 2 expansions are included in this box, Feats and Betrayal, and The Elements. They both offer new ways to play and win the game, while also increasing the challenge presented by Sylvion. Both expansions can be played independently or together. The game also includes a small appendix pawn to make the game more difficult, sort of like a final mini expansion as a third supplement, but really just insane difficulty. Alright, here we are looking at the contents on this page. Kind of what you'd expect. Sylvan cards, the good guy cards, which include Fountain, Tree, and Animal cards. Then the Ravage cards, which are bad, with Elemental cards, Support cards. Then the Blazing Elemental cards. Finally, the 12 Edge cards. Bloom side and Desolated side. Introductory game. Planting a Seed. Overview and Setup. The Sylvan cards. Might be Sylvan. Forget. The living aspects of the forest, united to stand against the Ravage's army. Play them wisely to win the game. Before starting the introductory game, return to the box any Sylvan cards featuring one of these 2 icons in its lower right corner. In A, in a kind of green clear circle, that's for the advanced game, and what looks like a little Ravage, a little fire, but hollow with a face, for expansion 1. These cards will be explained later. Shuffle the remaining 24 cards to assemble your deck. The Ravage cards. The army and logistics deployed by the Ravage to raise the forests. Before starting the introductory game, return to the box any Ravage cards featuring one of these two icons in its lower right corner. A red translucent A for the advanced game, and another flame symbol as well. This time it is filled in with a red instead of hollow with a face for expansion 2. These cards will be explained later. So the ones you remove from Sylvion are for the advanced game, for the Sylvion cards, and for the Ravage cards, you remove the hollow Ravage symbol. Then on the Ravage cards to remove to set up for the basic game, you're removing the A for the advanced game again, then the solid fire cards for expansion 2. Basically, expansion 1 is adding those cards to the Sylvion deck, and expansion 2 is adding cards to the Ravage deck. These cards will be explained later. The battlefield. Shuffle the remaining 48 Ravage cards, divide them into 4 stacks of 12 cards each, and place them to the right of the battlefield. See page 12. Take the 12 edge cards and complete the sides of the battlefield as shown. Page 7. Make sure that 6 of these edge cards are placed bloom side up, and the remaining 6 are placed desolated side up. Bloom is the green, life meter full side, and red is the dead, destroyed, battered one. 3. The game area created with the edge cards and the Ravage stacks is called the battlefield. So not only do the bloom cards, the edge cards show the health and vitality, it's your life meter for the forest, they also outline the perimeter of the battlefield. Edge cards not only frame the battlefield, they also represent the forest's vitality. Throughout the game, for each point of damage you suffer, you must flip an edge card from its bloom side to its desolated side. If you suffer more damage than you have bloom cards left, you immediately lose the game. Furthermore, at the end of the game, all edge cards must be bloom side up, otherwise the game is lost. Desolated cards show a number from 1 to 4. This number is not used in the introductory game. Its purposes will be explained in the advanced game rules later on, when they're explaining the preparing for battle drafting mechanism that's not in the basic game. 4. Place the blazing elemental cards nearby. They will be used later during the battle. Draw the first 8 cards from your defender deck. This is your starting hand. The battle may begin. So on this image we see the battlefield, we see the blazing elementals have a front and a back. We see the battlefield outlined by the edge cards. Half are bloom side up, half are desolated. The edge cards, 6 bloom side up, 6 desolated side up. 3. The edge cards and the Ravage stacks frame the 4x4 play area called the battlefield. It is on these 16 spaces that elemental cards will move, and also where you will place fountain and tree cards. 4. The blazing elemental cards. Battle. The battle phase is divided into turns, each of which follows these 4 steps. 1. Reveal Ravage cards. That's where they flip face up from the top of each deck, of the 4 decks. 2. Move elementals. All of the elemental Ravage cards, which is a lot of them, probably most of them, and it's certainly most of them in the basic game, they all move 1 step to the left. And 3. Reinforcements. That's where you'll draw your cards, I believe. We'll double check on that as we read through here. And 4. Defense. That's where you're playing as many cards as you can. That's my take on it, and so the pattern I've been doing here, let's read the official rules. 1. Reveal Ravage cards. Reveal the first Ravage card from each Ravage stack. Leave it on its stack. There are 2 types of Ravage cards: elemental cards and support cards. Elemental cards. These cards represent the blazing entities the Ravage has sent to raise the forest. Each turn, these cards continue their relentless march towards the forest, the fifth space of a row on the battlefield. When an elemental card reaches the forest, it inflicts an amount of damage equal to its strength. So strength is whatever number it has there, and that's the number of bloom cards that will have to be flipped to Desolate. Support cards. These cards represent the schemes and spells used by the Ravage to strengthen its elemental army and weaken the forest's defenders. These cards are resolved at the beginning of the turn and then discarded. The letter at the top right corner helps determine the order in which these cards must be resolved when revealed during the same turn. The introductory game shows only the Blazer Blazing, and Simoon cards. That's how you say it. So, support elemental cards are the main enemy bad guys coming to burn down the forest. Support cards are the special effect bad guy cards that do rough stuff, like make the elementals get stronger who are on the battlefield. Blaze cards. C. Replace each standard elemental card on the battlefield, including those revealed this turn, by a blazing elemental card. Elemental cards of strength 3, 2, and 1 are replaced by a 1 point stronger blazing elemental, 4, 3, 2, respectively. The 0 strength card is replaced by a strength 4 blazing elemental card. Discard the blaze card after resolving its effects. So the blaze card makes them all get stronger, and the 0 one of the reasons why it's so important to try and kill early before it gets transformed into a 4, is because that's when it's obviously easier to kill, and then it turns into the strongest of all types of elementals. Note, blazing elemental cards are not affected by the blaze card. If no elemental cards are in play when a blaze card is revealed, simply ignore its effects and discard it. Once an elemental card is transformed into a blazing elemental card, it can't keep being increased in strength by more blaze cards. Here we see on this battlefield, the strength 0 elemental card is replaced by a strength 4 blazing elemental card. Each strength 1 card is replaced by a strength 2 blazing elemental card, and the existing blazing elemental cards are not affected by the blaze card. They're unaffected. Important note, with the exception of the blaze card, blazing elemental cards are affected by all other cards and rules that affect normal elemental cards. You just can't turn them into a blazing more than once. Whenever this rulebook refers to elemental cards, blazing elemental cards are also included. Simoon cards. D. Each elemental card on the battlefield, including those revealed this turn, immediately moves 1 space to the left. Discard the Simoon card after resolving its effects. And as you might have guessed, in the next phase, all of them move anyway. So a Simoon card will make the ones on the battlefield move extra quickly, because it'll give them an extra push to the left. Note, if you reveal numerous Simoon cards during the same turn, each Simoon card will make every elemental card move 1 space to the left. Blazing elemental cards are also affected by Simoon cards. If there are no elemental/blazing elemental cards in play when a Simoon is revealed, simply ignore its effects and discard it. Best case scenario for both of these bad cards, Simoon and Blaze, we've mentioned here. Phase 2. Move elementals. Move each elemental, those revealed this turn, as well as those already on the battlefield, 1 space to the left, towards the forest. When an elemental reaches the 5th space of its row, the forest, because there's no longer a blank space there, it's hitting trees, it inflicts an amount of damage equal to its strength. For each damage suffered, flip an edge card to its desolated side. The elemental is then discarded. If you must flip an edge card, but are unable to do so, because they're all on the desolated side, you immediately lose the game. In this example on page 11, a strength 3 elemental reaches the 5th space, forest. The player must then flip 3 edge cards to their desolated side, and then discard the elemental. If an elemental card reaches a space occupied by a tree or a fountain card, combat occurs, as explained on page 11. Phase 3. Reinforcements. Draw the first 3 cards of your defender deck. If need be, shuffle your discard pile into a new defender deck, as was done at the beginning of the game. There are 3 types of cards you can have in your hand: Animal, Tree, and Fountain. Animal, Tree, and Fountain. Tree cards. Skipped a little. Yeah, animal cards. These cards represent the timely intervention of one or more animals. They are immediately discarded, and their effects are applied as soon as they are played. They're instant cards you play right away for their effect. The introductory game animal cards are described on page 22. Tree cards. Tree cards represent the fantastical flora that grows in the forest of the Universe, and allow the forest to renew itself at the end of the game. A tree card must be placed on an empty space of the battlefield. Remember, you can't just survive the onslaught of ravages. You'll have to have enough tree cards at the end that it'll regrow the desolated ones, and each tree card has a value of how much it will regrow. But watch out, while you're planting them, elementals will destroy them, so you want to plant them where they'll be safe, or behind fountains, which guard them. Jumping ahead of myself now. Let's keep reading. At the end of the game, after the final assault, printed on page 12, count the vitality points at the bottom of each tree card present on the battlefield. For each such vitality point, flip an edge card to its bloom side. Reminder, to win the game, all edge cards must be bloom side up. Fountain cards. These cards represent the aquatic ramparts the forest raises to neutralize the fearsome fire elementals. A fountain card must be played on an empty space of the battlefield. Place them wisely so as to protect the forest and your tree cards. Combat. As previously mentioned, when an elemental reaches a space occupied by a tree or fountain, a combat occurs. Combat is resolved in this manner. Compare both card strengths. The weaker card, lower strength, is destroyed, i.e. discarded. There will be a Sylvion discard pile, and a Ravaged discard pile. If the weaker card is a fountain or a tree card, the elemental card takes its place because the elemental is relentless. If the elemental card is the weaker card, the fountain or tree stays in place. So, if the tower, meaning tree or fountain, is strong enough to withhold it and stronger than the fire coming at it, it survives and the fire is destroyed. Otherwise, the fire destroys it but doesn't get slowed down. If the elemental card, in case of a tie, both cards are destroyed. In this example to the right, a Strength 4 elemental moves onto a Strength 2 fountain. A combat occurs. Since the elemental is stronger than the fountain is destroyed, and the elemental takes its place. Note that when a fountain card is destroyed, you get to draw 1 card. More information on the Sylvion cards can be found on page 20. And that's important, and something I forgot in my first game. Even if the fountain is not strong enough to destroy the fire, or it destroys the fire and dies too, like in a tie, you'll still get to draw a sympathy card from your good guy Sylvion deck every time a fountain is destroyed. Because fountains are all about helping you and protecting your forest and the trees. Phase 4. Defense. You may play as many cards as possible from your hand as you wish, as long as you can pay their cost. The cost of a card is shown on its top left corner. The cost is paid by discarding a number of cards equal to the cost of the card you wish to play. Some cards show a cost of 0. You do not need to discard any cards to play these. Any other card, you still have to use the card itself. At the end of this step, you may not have more than 10 cards, your hand limit, in your hand. Discard the excess cards. So after you've played all the cards you want to play in defense, anything over 10 gets discarded. And it's important to note that the cost of a card doesn't include the card itself. So if a card costs 1 to play, you play that card down, and you also discard an additional card. So an interesting part of the strategy is not just deciding what cards to draft, that'll come later, or when to use which card, but which cards to use and which cards to use as money to pay for using those cards, which gives it an extra layer of strategy. Game end. When the last card of each Ravage stack has been revealed, the final turn begins. Play throughout the 4 steps. Reveal Ravage cards, move elementals, reinforcements, and defense, followed by one last additional step, the Final Assault. Final Assault. If there are any elemental cards left on the battlefield, each of these will move to the left until it is destroyed, or it reaches the 5th space of its row, the forest, in which case it inflicts damage as normal. Basically what that means is in the final round, after you've played everything you can in defense for that last reveal of cards, and they've moved and so forth, and you play defense, they all just move as far to the left as they can until they're stopped or they do damage. So there's no bad guys who are simply left somewhere on the battlefield during the game. That won't happen because of the Final Assault. If you survive the Final Assault, count how many vitality points you have on the battlefield surviving tree cards, shown at the bottom of the tree cards. If this total is higher than or equal to the number of edge cards that are desolated side up, you win the game, i.e. each vitality point allows you to flip a desolated side up card to its bloom side. Otherwise, the forest has been reduced to ash and you lose the game. So that's tricky because you can't just survive like you'd expect from most kind of survival tower defense type games, whether it's a board game or a video game. You have to be able to fully heal and recover, which is interesting. It's also kind of fun because even if you lose, you can kind of feel like you have a partial victory for surviving, even if you didn't heal back up. At least I do, but perhaps I'm looking for any way to pat myself on the back, as one does. Rules for 2 players. The rules for 2 players are the same as the solo rules, with the following exceptions. Each player draws a starting hand of 6 cards. I believe it's 8 cards, we said, in the solo version. Each turn, one player is the active player, and she may play as many cards from her hand as she wishes. Her partner must pay the cost for those cards by discarding cards from his hand. He may not refuse to pay. The role each player has will alternate this way. Turn 1. Player A is the active player. Reveal Ravage card / Elementals movement / reinforcements. Player A draws 2 cards / defense. Player A plays cards from her hand. Those cards are paid for by player B. Turn 2. Player B becomes the active player. Reveal Ravage cards / elemental movement / reinforcements. Player B draws 2 cards / defense. Player B plays cards from his hand. Those cards are paid for by player A. Turn 3, player A becomes the active player once again, and so on it goes. So I must admit, I have not played a 2-player version of Sylvion yet, using these rules. I think they probably sound more complicated or convoluted than they are. I bet once you're in the swing of it, it'll be fairly elegant, like the game itself is. Mostly I haven't played them because I mostly play solitaire for this game, and if I'm playing a 2-player game, it's been other games. But I bet it would be fine. What I will say, though, is that I found myself wanting to play the Onirum 2-player rules more, and maybe they just sounded like they appealed to me more, even though I like Sylvion overall more, something I'm in the minority on. One thing that I'd like to try with Sylvion as well is playing basically a one-player game and just making the decisions together. Now, in theory, you can do that with any solitaire game. You're just playing a single person together. And I don't know how appealing that would be to most people. But I feel like there's enough strategy and depth to this that it wouldn't feel boring or feeling like you're tug of war over too few decisions. Moving on here. Players choose, before starting, how much cooperation they wish to play with. Pure logistics. They can show each other's their hands and discuss which strategy they wish to adopt. Or total silence. Players may not communicate any information regarding their cards in their hand, and must guess their partner's objectives by observing their actions. I feel like the only way I'd really want to get into this is if I did that second one, because if it was total communication and pure logistics, I'd almost rather just play from a single hand. But the second way would be interesting, because that lack of communication and trying to figure out what the other person wants reminds me of how it's been described to me, the game, and Then We Held Hands, which is a two-player cooperative game where you can't fully communicate as well. So that's everything for the basic game, including how to play it two-player. Up next, I'm moving into the advanced game, and then the expansions, and things like that. So if that's all you need to know for now, you can stop now. Otherwise, listen on, and feel free to keep following on the page here. As they say, reading and hearing at the same time helps you absorb and internalize, I think. Advanced game. 2 new Ravage cards, Demobilization and Desiccation, are added to the stacks. These cards are presented on page 19. Since this adds 16 cards to the stack, the battle will last 4 more turns, 16 instead of 12. 2. 4 new Sylvion cards are added to your options. Types of Sylvion cards, not just total. They are stags, squirrels, doves, and fish. So you'll notice that the basic game, the simple introductory game, had all of the fountains and trees, which mostly have a numerical value plus their basic power. But the advanced game adds in most of the animals, which have a special ability that is instant. Step 3. Before the battle phase, there is a mobilization phase. It is during this phase that you will need to assemble as best as you can from your defender deck the 64 Sylvion cards. This is the defender deck you will be using during the battle phase, and as such, the deck you assemble each game will be different. So this I really love. Not only does it feel like a mini game within the game, but it's a fun solitaire version of drafting that I haven't really seen before, and I didn't think I would like. Drafting and solitaire by themselves are usually not that amazing to me, except for great exceptions. In this case, this game is great. But all things being equal, it's not what I would normally go to. But this really works well, and it also means that you effectively deck build before each battle. So part of the strategy is not just how you play your deck, but how you build it as you go in mobilization. Alright, phase 1, mobilization. During this phase, you will have multiple turns to choose Sylvion cards in order to assemble the best defender deck. The Sylvion cards are revealed one after the other, each in one of the 4 recruitment columns. Each turn you will need to choose a column, take all the cards from that column, 1 to 4, and add them to your defender deck. You must choose wisely, for not all of the cards will remain at your disposal. Each turn, a desertion card will occur, where all the cards from one column will be permanently removed from the game. The column that is lost is randomly determined by a desolated card. Setup. Shuffle the 64 Sylvion cards from the base game, the 24 from the introductory game, and the 40 cards with the A for advanced game. Shuffle the 12 edge cards to create the desertion deck. Only the bloom side must be visible. This means that the numbers on the deserted side will be hidden. So this is why those numbers on the edge cards don't matter for the health of the forest once the game is started, but they matter for using them as their dual purpose for the mobilization portion of the game. Mobilization. The mobilization phase is played over many turns, each divided into the following 4 steps. So again, we're hearing a lot of phases, steps, turns. Think of it this way. The main battle portion of Sylvion is most of it, and that has the 4 phases that we already talked about. Before you play any of that game, you have a shorter game called Mobilization, and that shorter game has 4 steps that you keep doing over and over again until it's over. Then you put that aside, you're into the battle game. I just want to make that clear in case you think maybe there's a little bit of mobilization before each battle or something. It doesn't work like that. It's a mini game, like a warm-up game, than the main game. 4 steps. 1. Summoning. 2. Recruitment. 3. Summoning. 4. Desertion. Then would repeat with summoning, recruitment. So summoning, recruitment, summoning, desertion, etc. Summoning. Reveal the first cards 1 to 4 from the Sylvion deck and place them next to each other to create 4 vertical columns. This is how you create/complete the 4 recruitment columns. So make 4 columns, 1, 2, 3, 4, in a horizontal line. Important. If there are already 4 Sylvion cards in a column, do not add cards to that column until it has been emptied, either during recruitment or desertion, both described below, and the only 2 ways you empty a column. 2. Recruitment. Choose a column. Take every Sylvion card in that column and add them to your defender deck. So you simply pick which of the 4 columns you want, and after the first summoning, each one only has 1 in it. 2. Recruitment. We just said that, 3. Summoning. Identical to step 1. Add 1 to each. So now all of the columns will have 3 in them. Will have 2 in them, except one of the columns, which will only have 1, and that's the one that you already recruited from in the last step. Then finally, step 4, desertion. Reveal the top card from the desolation deck. The number on its desolated side tells you which column is deserted. Remove all the Sylvion cards in the matching numbered column from the game. So you don't know which one will be coming next until you kind of count cards a little bit from the edge cards. I guess there's 4, 8, 12, 16. There's 4 of each of the 1 through 4 because there's 16 of them. But it will tell you which gets destroyed, deserted, all the animals and fountains and forests and our trees get scared off. Mobilization phase end. The end of the mobilization phase can be triggered in one of 2 ways. You reveal the 12th and last card from the desertion deck, the edge cards. The mobilization phase ends immediately. Any Sylvion cards left in the Sylvion deck and on the table are removed from the game, so only the cards you've drafted you get to keep. Or you reveal the last card from the Sylvion deck. Mobilization continues, even if you did not complete every recruitment column, until you reveal an edge card whose number matches an empty column. The mobilization phase ends immediately. Any Sylvion cards left on the table are removed from the game. So if you ever run out of edge cards to look at what number to desert from, or you ever need to desert a column, but that column is empty, both will end the mobilization immediately, and both happen pretty quickly. It's a pretty short mini game. Rules for 2 players. The modifications for 2 players for the battle phase are unchanged from those presented on page 13. What follows are the modifications to the mobilization phase. The players assemble a single defender deck, and they choose one after the other. The mobilization phase is thus resolved in this order. Summoning/recruitment, player A chooses. Summoning/desertion. Summoning/recruitment, player B chooses. Summoning/desertion. So each player gets summoning recruitment, summoning desertion, then the next player gets summoning recruitment, summoning desertion, and so on. Phase 2. Battle. Shuffle your defender deck, the Sylvion cards you chose during Phase 1, and draw 8 cards to form your starting hand. Shuffle the 64 Ravage cards and divide them into 4 equal stacks of 16. Create the battlefield by placing these 4 Ravage stacks next to one another, and the 12 edge cards along the other 3 sides of the battlefield, bloom side up. The battlefield will thus be identical to the one shown on page 7 for the basic game, with the exception that all edge cards are are bloom side up instead of 6, because obviously you're going against more total Ravage cards. There's 16 in each of the 4 Ravage decks instead of 12, and there's more difficult cards in there also. Battle. The battle phase is resolved as in the introductory game, with the following exception. If you must draw a card from your defender deck when it is depleted, a demobilization occurs immediately. Demobilization. Choose one of the following 2 options. So you have to pick one of these 2. Either A, remove from the game 2 cards of your choice from the discard pile, then shuffle the discard pile to form a new defender deck. Or B, shuffle the discard pile to form a new defender deck, and then remove the top card of your deck from the game. You may look at it to see what you lost. So reshuffle your discard into your deck to make a new deck, but either randomly get rid of 1 or pick 2 in your discard pile to get rid of. Game end. Identical to the base game. Adjusting the difficulty. For a more difficult game, adjust the difficulty as you see fit. Setup, start the game with 3, 6, as in the introductory game, or 9 edge cards desolated side up. Battle, draw 2 cards instead of 3 during the reinforcement step. I'm probably just not clever enough or mathematically smart enough or logically witty enough, if you will, but I've never had to increase the difficulty for this game to make it feel challenging enough. Ravage cards. There are 2 types of Ravage cards, elemental cards and support cards. Elemental cards. These cards represent the blazing entities the Ravage has sent to raise the forest. The elementals stay on the battlefield until they reach the forest, or until they are destroyed. Each turn they move 1 space to the left during step 2. If an elemental card must move onto a space occupied by another card, fountain or tree, combat occurs. If an elemental card reaches the 5th space of its row, the forest, it inflicts a number of damage equal to its strength. Flip that number of edge cards to their desolated side, after which it is discarded. There are 8 elemental cards for each of the 4 strengths, 0, 1, 2, and 3. Note, 1 elemental card of each strength, 0, 1, 2, and 3, features this icon, the little fiery, opaque blaze. This icon is important only if you play with the Ravage pawn, explained on page 30. Otherwise, ignore it. That's where you can increase the difficulty even more by making it so certain elementals become incredibly tough. Support cards. Introductory game. Blaze cards. Parentheses C. That's the order you would play support cards in if you're not sure of the order. Replace each standard elemental card on the battlefield, including those revealed this turn, with an appropriate blazing elemental card. Elemental cards of strength 3, 2, and 1 are replaced by a card that is 1 point stronger, i.e. a strength 3 elemental is replaced by a strength 4 blazing elemental, a strength 2 by a strength 3, and a strength 1 by a strength 2. Exception. The strength 0 elemental card is replaced by a strength 4 blazing elemental. And of course, once it's turned into a blazing elemental, regardless of strength, it can't increase in strength further through blaze cards. Obviously, we're repeating ourselves with these because of the initial rules. All rules that apply to elemental cards also apply to blazing elemental cards, except for the blaze cards that affect only standard elemental cards. Discard the blaze cards after resolving its effects. Simoon, in parentheses D for order. Each elemental card on the battlefield, including those revealed this turn, immediately moves one space to the left. Discard the Simoon card after resolving its effect. Advanced game. Desiccation, in parentheses A. Discard a random card from your hand, or choose 2 cards from your hand and discard them. Discard the desiccation card after resolving its effect. So, works kind of like a demobilization, but instead of removing cards from the game that are in your discard pile, it's discarding cards from your hand. So, a little bit not as strong as demobilization. But up next is demobilization cards, which do basically the same thing that a demobilization does whenever your deck runs out and you have to reshuffle. These are in parentheses B. Remove a random card from your hand. Remove a random card from your discard pile from the game, or choose 2 cards in your discard pile and remove them from the game. Discard the demobilization card after resolving its effects. General rule. When there are many elemental cards on the battlefield, always move them starting with the top row and the leftmost card. If more than one support card with the same letter are revealed at the same time, apply their effects starting from the top row and moving along to the bottom. If for any reason the effect of a support card cannot be resolved, simply discard it without effect. So it's all kind of like you'd expect. You resolve things in the order of their letters when there's support cards revealed at the same time. And for elementals and how things move, and for other orders, if you're not sure, it's from left to right and top to bottom. Even if you are sure, that's how it would go. Up next, Sylvion cards. There are 3 types of Sylvion cards. Animal, fountains, and trees. Animals, fountains, and trees. At the top left of each Sylvion card is a cost shown in a water drop. A water drop is the cost. Fountain cards. These cards represent the aquatic ramparts of the forest. The forest raises to neutralize the fearsome fire elementals. A fountain card must be played on an empty space of the battlefield and stays there until the end of the game or until destroyed. Each fountain has 2 characteristics: its cost to place it on the battlefield and its strength depicted on the leaf, which is used when an elemental moves onto the space occupied by a fountain card. So, cost is water droplet, the strength of fighting elemental cards is the leaf. Fountain of Strength 1, cost 0. Fountain of Strength 2, cost 1. Fountain of Strength 3, cost 2. And Fountain of Strength 4, cost 3. Important: when a fountain card is destroyed, immediately draw a card. So that's your pity help if one of your defensive tower fountains is destroyed. Tree cards. These cards represent the fantastical flora that grows in the forest of the Oniverse. These cards are fragile. They all have a strength of 0. As such, they are destroyed by any elemental card, and only the strength 0 elemental is destroyed in combat. However, the trees that stand at the end of the game renew the forest and can also improve the stag card during the game. At the end of the game, after the final assault, count the number of vitality points on each tree card present on the battlefield. For each vitality point, flip an edge card to its bloom side. If all edge cards are on their bloom side, you win the game. So tree cards are your real chance for winning, even if you survive. As we move into other things like the expansions and so forth and the details of each type of card, there's enough detail here in the rulebook that I won't need to be adding as much commentary, in my view, as a lot of it kind of gets into reference or areas where I'm not as certain of and don't want to lead you astray by saying something outside of the rulebook unless I'm certain. Tree cards of Vitality 1 cost 0. Tree cards of Vitality 2 cost 1. Trees of Vitality 3 cost 2. And trees of Vitality 4 cost 3. So again, that's their Vitality, meaning how many trees they regrow. But in terms of their leaf strength of protecting, they're all strength 0, which means they all die if an elemental hits them. And the only elemental that they take down while they do it is the strength 0 elementals. And that makes sense. That follows the rules we've already established. And on each tree card, we have the water droplet for cost, the leaf always showing 0 for strength, unless they make more expansions that are different. And finally, the vitality at the bottom, how many trees it will regrow at the end of the game. Animal cards. These cards represent the timely intervention of one or more animals. They are immediately discarded, and their effects are applied as soon as they are played. Introductory game. Whale cards. Cost 0. Move an elemental up to 3 spaces in the direction of your choice. You may not move an elemental diagonally. You may move an elemental 1 row to another. An elemental may not move onto a space occupied by another elemental. You may move an elemental onto the last space, in which case it inflicts the damage as usual. So whale cards let you manipulate where the elementals are. So that could be good if you want to move them sat there about to fight a fountain that will kill them instead of running into your trees. That's whale cards. They don't cost anything to play except for the card itself, of course. Elephant cards. Cost 1. Destroy an elemental by removing it from the battlefield. These are great, an instant lightning bolt to kill an elemental. And those are both in the introductory game. Hedgehog cards. Cost 0. This is the only Sylvion card that can be played during Step 1, Reveal Ravage cards. It allows you to immediately discard a Ravage card that was revealed this turn, elemental or support, without applying its effects. Note, a Hedgehog card must be played at the beginning of Step 1, before the Ravage cards is resolved this turn. So it can only be played the very moment Ravage cards are revealed. Normally, you can only play any of your Sylvion cards during the defense step phase. But in this case, you can play them during Reveal Ravage. Hedgehog cards might be the strongest of all Sylvion cards. Not that you would want to only have them. Up next, Owl cards. Cost 1. Draw 3 cards, or have your partner draw 3 cards in a 2-player game. Note, if your defender deck runs out when drawing 3 cards, a demobilization occurs, after which you draw the missing cards. In such cases, since the old owl was discarded before applying its effects, it is shuffled back into the deck and may be drawn during the same action. So an owl card is interesting. I've heard a lot of folks say that. They don't think it's that strong because basically you get rid of 2 cards, including the owl card, and its cost. But then you draw 3, so a net increase of 1. But it could work if there's certain cards you need more of and ones in your hand that aren't that useful for a while. Advanced game animals. Stag cards. Cost 0. Choose one of the following 2 effects. Flip up to 2 edge cards to their bloom side, or for each tree card you have on the battlefield, flip 1 edge card to its bloom side. So in reverse order on that, you can make a stag card who shows up with his cool antlers that look like trees, like a magical stag. You can play the stag for every tree card, regardless of their vitality, regardless of their tree power. If you have 4 trees on the battlefield, you flip 4 face up. 4 edge cards become healed, and that heals your life even before the end of the game, which helps you survive, and of course at the end helps you win. Or flip 2 up. So obviously you would do whichever one is more. So at the minimum, you would want to use it to flip 2 up. So that's quite good. Cost 0 besides itself. Dove's card. Cost 1. Discard the top card from each of the Ravage stack without applying its effects, effectively making it so the game is 1 round shorter, so 15 instead of 16, etc. I've always felt that was perhaps one of the strongest. Squirrel's cards. Cost 1. Reveal the top 2 cards of each Ravage stack. Return them to their original stacks in the order of your choice. So that's never been as appealing to me, but in coordination with a Dove's card, could be incredibly useful. Finally, Fish cards. Cost 1. This card gives you 3 points to pay for other Sylvion cards. In other words, when you play this card, i.e. after paying its cost, it counts as if you had discarded 3 cards from your hand. You may pay for 1 or more cards with these points. Any unspent points are lost at the end of the turn. Therefore, it is not possible to save them for a following turn. You may, of course, discard a fish card without paying its cost to get 1 point, as with any other Sylvion card. So that's everything for the advanced game, including details on the additional animals, which are the new Sylvion cards for the advanced game, and the full array of support cards for the Ravage decks. The Ravage deck and its 4 stacks. Now we're getting into the first expansion. Extraordinary Feats and Betrayal. Components, 8 Betrayal cards, and 8 Extraordinary Feat cards, which each look different. The Betrayal cards all look the same. Setup. When setting up for the mobilization phase, shuffle the 16 cards from this expansion, along with the 64 cards from the base game. Note, although Betrayal cards are shuffled with the Sylvion cards, they are not considered Sylvion cards. Gameplay. As in the base game, but with the following exceptions. Mobilization. During a summoning, step 1 or 3, if you reveal a Betrayal card, place it in the recruitment column as you normally would, and then immediately reveal another card that you place in the same column on the Betrayal card, slightly offset so that the Betrayal card remains visible. Therefore, a recruitment column could now hold more than 4 cards, a maximum of 4 Sylvion cards and Extraordinary Feat cards, and 1 or more Betrayal cards. So whenever you draw a Betrayal card into a column, it doesn't count towards that column's maximum of 4, and you immediately draw another one anyway. It gets tagged on to whatever else is in there. Note, if you reveal several Betrayal cards, one after the other, place them one on top of the other, still slightly offset so that the Betrayal cards remain visible. Oh, I read that, forgive me. During a summoning step, 1 or 3, if you reveal an Extraordinary Feat card, place it as you would any normal Sylvion card, and then continue with the next column. So when mobilizing, Extraordinary Feat cards are not different. Step 2. If you choose a column with 1 or more Betrayal cards, add them to your Defender deck. During recruitment, Step 2. If you choose a column with 1 or more Extraordinary Feat cards, do not add them to your Defender deck, but instead set them aside next to your Defender deck. So whenever you successfully draft or get a column with Extraordinary Feat cards, you'll still get all the other cards, but you'll keep face up in front of you, separate from your deck, the Extraordinary Feat cards. Battle. Betrayal cards. When you would draw a Betrayal card in your starting hand, during Step 3, Reinforcements, or after any game effect, you must immediately choose one of the following. Discard that Betrayal card, or discard another card of your choice from the game and remove the Betrayal card from the game. Very important. This is the only way to remove a Betrayal card from the game. As a matter of fact, Betrayal cards are never removed from the game due to demobilization effect, either with the support card or when your deck runs out of cards. During the demobilization, you may never choose to remove a Betrayal card from the game, and if a Betrayal card is randomly revealed, you must set it aside and draw another random card to remove from the game. Then the Betrayal card is returned to the discard pile, or, depending on the situation, reshuffled into the deck. So that's tricky because you can choose with the Betrayal card just simply get rid of it, and that's good because you don't have to worry about it, but it did clog up your hand. That was one less card you have to work with now. And it'll come back later when you reshuffle your deck. And you can't count on getting rid of it with the demobilization ever. Or you can get rid of it altogether out of the game, but then you have to discard another card, which means your hand is now too short. So betrayal cards definitely bring you down. If you can avoid drafting them, that's definitely positive. Extraordinary feat cards. All extraordinary feat cards acquired during the mobilization phase can be used at any time during the battle phase. During Step 4, Defense, you may play any number of extraordinary feat cards. They are free to play and are removed from the game after being played, not reshuffled. Extraordinary feat cards cost nothing to play. They also may not be discarded in order to pay for any types of cards. So they're kind of like Sylvion cards in that you're playing them during Defense and they're useful and good, but they don't get reshuffled back in. They're not in the deck itself. You don't draw them. And they're kept separate. They're your special one-off abilities, each one. Important. Extraordinary feat cards can never trigger automatically, and they may only be played during Step 4, Defense, when you would normally be playing Sylvion cards besides Hedgehogs. Now we're reading the cards themselves. Owl's Wisdom. Look through your Defender deck for 2 cards of your choice, and add them to your hand. Reshuffle your Defender deck. Deluge of the Elephants. Discard all cards from the battlefield. Fountains, trees, and elementals. If playing with Expansion 2, also discard geysers and acid lakes. Hedgehog Fence. Skip the next Step 1. Reveal Ravage cards. Squirrel Disinformation. Reveal the top 2 cards of each Ravage stack. Of these 8 cards, return 2 to each stack in the order of your choice. These cards are not required to return to the same stack from which they were revealed. The Stag King returns. If there are 8 tree cards on the battlefield, including at least one of each of the 4 tree types, you immediately win the game. So it's pretty hard. You have to have 8 trees on the battlefield and at least one of each of the 4 tree types. Fish Flood. If there are 10 fountain cards on the battlefield, including one of each of the 4 fountain types, you immediately win the game. Dove's Armistice. If you have 16 cards in your hand, you immediately win the game, which is difficult to do without special effects of cards, because at the end of each Defender step, as you may recall, you have to discard down to 10 if you have more than that. Charging Whales. If the 12 edge cards are flipped to their desolated side, and there are 12 elemental cards on the battlefield, you immediately win the game. So, Charging Whales is really interesting. It effectively will give you a last chance way to win the game, like a Deus Ex Machina, if you would normally be about to not only lose, but about to lose with 12 elemental cards on the battlefield, which is really hard to have happen, because there's only 16 spaces on the battlefield altogether. I don't know that I can ever imagine Charging Whales being pulled off successfully. That was Expansion 1, Betrayal and Extraordinary Feats. Here's Expansion 2, The Elements. Components, 16 element cards. 4 geysers, 4 stone rain, 4 acid lake, 4 temporal tornado. Setup. During setup for Phase 2, Battle, shuffle the 16 cards from this expansion, along with the 64 Ravage cards. Then divide these 80 cards into 4 stacks of 20 cards. So it makes it so that each stack of Ravage cards will get even larger, going from 12 to 16 in the advanced game. In this expansion 2, they'll go up to 20. So you're adding these to the Ravage decks. These are additional Ravage cards that affect the row in which they are revealed. Stone Rain, C. Starting from the Ravage stack and moving to the left, destroy the first fountain or tree in this row. If no such card can be found, flip one edge card to its desolated side. If all edge cards are already on their desolated side, you immediately lose the game. Discard Stone Rain after applying its effects. Temporal Tornado B. Return all fountain and tree cards in this row to your hand. If no fountain or tree cards exist in this row, return 2 cards of your choice from your hand to the top of your defender deck in any order. If you have no cards in your hand, ignore this card. Discard Temporal Tornado after applying its effects. Acid Lake B. Put this card on the empty space without a tree, fountain, elemental, acid lake, or geyser card that is furthest away from this Ravage stack. An acid lake remains on that space until the end of the game and is no longer counts as a movement space for elemental cards. In other words, an elemental card that should move on to a space occupied by an acid lake must immediately move to the next space. If that is the 5th space, it inflicts its damage. If there are no empty spaces in this row, discard the acid lake. Geyser A. Put this card on the empty space without a tree, fountain, elemental, acid lake, or geyser card that is furthest away from the Ravage stack. A geyser remains on that space until the end of the game, until an elemental card moves onto that space, or until you decide to initiate a geyser eruption. See below. If there are no empty spaces in this row, discard the geyser. If an elemental card reaches a space occupied by a geyser, both cards are immediately destroyed, regardless of the strength of the elemental. Excuse me. Where was I? During Step 4, Defense, if one or more geyser cards are on the battlefield, you may decide to have one or more of them erupt. Geyser Eruption. Discard all elemental cards on the battlefield that in a straight line, above, below, or to the left or to the right of the geyser card. You can choose only one of these directions, then discard the geyser card. So, of all the new Ravage cards added with Expansion 2, only the geyser will help you, and it'll only be worth it to make up for the new negative ones if you use it in such a way that it's very helpful, such as killing a large number of elementals, especially 3 elementals, would be the maximum that it could kill, and that would be excellent. I think 3 would be the maximum. So that's the end of Expansion 2. The only thing left is Appendix, the Ravage. Kind of a mini expansion, but not quite. Setup. Put the Ravage pawn near the battlefield. Gameplay. Phase 2. Battle. During Step 1, reveal Ravage cards. If you reveal an elemental card with the Ravage icon, put the Ravage pawn onto that card. From this point on, if that elemental should move onto a fountain card of higher or equal strength, destroy the fountain card, remove the Ravage pawn from the card, and move the elemental card onto the space previously occupied by the just destroyed fountain card. It gives the elemental card an extra life and makes it kill whatever would have killed it. If an effect should discard this card, remove the Ravage pawn and leave the card on the battlefield. Extra life again. If this card should reach the 5th space in this row with the Ravage pawn on it, you immediately lose the game. So even if you can't finish off the card that the Ravage pawn is on, you at least need to kill it once, so to speak, do 1 damage, so that you can get the Ravage pawn off of it. Notes. If during Step 1, reveal Ravage cards, another elemental card with a Ravage icon is revealed, move the Ravage pawn onto that card. If it is stronger than the card the pawn currently occupies. If it's the same or less, otherwise, leave the Ravage pawn on its current elemental card. So it will hop to the strongest elemental card around that has a Ravage icon on it. The card which the ravaged pawn is on remains affected by all effects. Blazing. Replace the elemental card with a blazing elemental card, making sure the ravaged card pawn follows. So if it turned into a blazing elemental with a high strength, it'll still have a ravaged pawn on it. Simoon. Whale Lake, Acid Lake. The pawn moves with the elemental card. Doves, Hedgehog. The elemental card is not yet in play. It is therefore not yet protected by the ravaged pawn and is discarded. So that's nice. If you're about to have one that has a ravaged pawn symbol on it, kill it before it acquires the pawn, because you don't have to kill it twice that way. Elephants, Deluge of the Elephants, Geyser. The ravaged pawn is removed instead of the card. Of course, if another effect should later, same or in future turns, cause the card to be destroyed, it will be destroyed since it is no longer protected by the pawn. So it gives it an extra life. It hops to the strongest. It'll lose if it gets to the end. It's a mean little jerk. Then we have more art, and that's the end of the rules, including basic advanced game with mobilization, details of all of the Sylvion card types, and the specific cards themselves. Same with the Ravage cards, Expansion 1, Expansion 2, and the Appendix. So it's quite thorough there, but there are still better videos out there explaining how to play. I'm certain there must be. And great videos watching playthroughs, which I hope to make some of those soon if they're not already up by the time you see this. Comments, subscribing, liking, all those things are appreciated, and you don't have to, of course, but thanks for watching my silly little videos here where I talk about and geek out about games that I absolutely love. I'm an audio learner myself, so I like listening to people explain or talk about or what have you for different games and other things. So that's why I make this, in case you are someone who benefits from that too. And I probably should have given the preamble, but I'll hopefully put it in the description. And I'm sure it's all the better to learn this game if you read what's on the screen or the rule book in hand while you listen to me speak, because then you have that double effect of reading while listening. I regret not saying that at the beginning. Anyway, thanks for watching. I'll see you soon.